How Finland created the world's best school system. Imagine a country where students go to school fewer hours than almost anywhere else in the world, where homework is nearly non-existent, where there are no standardized tests until the age of 16, and yet that country consistently produces some of the most educated, capable, and creative young people on the planet. This is not a thought experiment. This is Finland. And the story of how a small Nordic nation transformed itself from an educational underachiever into the world's most celebrated school system is one of the most remarkable policy success stories in modern history. Finland sits in northern Europe with a population of just 5.5 million people. For most of the 20th century, its education system was considered average at best. Students were divided early by academic ability. Rote memorization dominated classrooms. Teachers were not particularly well respected or well paid. Then, in the early 1970s, Finland made a decision that would change everything. The government launched a comprehensive, top-to-bottom reform of its entire education system. The results would take decades to fully emerge, but when they did, the world took notice. The first major shift was structural. Finland eliminated its two-track school system, which had previously divided children into academic and vocational streams at a very young age. In its place came the peruskoulu, or comprehensive school, where all students from age 7 to 16 would study together in the same institutions, following the same curriculum. This single decision carried enormous philosophical weight. It said, clearly and deliberately, that every child deserves the same quality of education regardless of their background, their perceived intelligence, or their parents' income. This commitment to equity became the foundation upon which everything else was built. The second transformation was in how the country treated its teachers. Finland decided that teaching would become one of the most competitive and prestigious professions in the country. Today, only 8% of applicants are accepted into Finnish teacher education programs. Those programs are rigorous, academically demanding, and fully funded by the state. Every classroom teacher in Finland holds at minimum a master's degree. This is not optional. It is a legal requirement. Teachers are trained not just in their subject matter but in pedagogy, child psychology, and research methods. They graduate understanding how children learn at a deep, scientific level, and they are trusted to apply that knowledge with real professional autonomy. That autonomy is critical to understanding why Finland works. Finnish teachers are not handed scripted lessons or mandatory textbook chapters. There is a national curriculum, but it functions more like a framework of goals than a rigid set of instructions. Teachers decide how to achieve those goals in ways that suit their specific students. They design their own lessons, choose their own materials, and assess their students in ways they believe are most meaningful. In Finland, a teacher is not a delivery mechanism for standardized content. A teacher is a professional expert whose judgment is respected and relied upon. This stands in stark contrast to systems that have moved heavily toward standardized testing as a measure of teacher and school performance. Finland essentially rejected that approach. The country does not rank its schools. It does not publish league tables comparing one school's performance to another. There is no national standardized testing until the very end of secondary school, around age 16. Before that point, teachers conduct their own assessments, using a variety of methods to understand how individual students are progressing. The absence of high-stakes testing does something profound to a classroom. It removes the incentive to teach to a test. It allows teachers to pursue genuine curiosity and deep understanding rather than performance metrics. Finland also dramatically restructured the school day itself. Finnish children typically start formal school at age 7, a full year or two later than children in many other developed countries. Research consistently shows that early childhood is better spent in play-based learning, developing social skills, creativity, and intrinsic curiosity. Finnish kindergartens and preschools operate on this principle entirely. By the time Finnish children enter first grade, they are developmentally ready for structured learning in a way that makes the process more effective and far more enjoyable. Once in school, students in Finland have one of the shortest school days in the developed world. They attend roughly 4 to 5 hours of instruction per day in the early years, increasing somewhat in secondary school. Every 45 minutes of class is followed by 15 minutes of mandatory outdoor recess, regardless of weather. Finnish educators understand that children need movement, fresh air, and unstructured time to consolidate learning and maintain focus. Homework in the lower grades is minimal, sometimes non-existent. Studies from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, better known as the OECD, have consistently shown that Finnish students spend less time studying than students in countries like South Korea, Japan, and the United States, yet achieve outcomes that equal or surpass them. The results of this system became globally visible in the year 2000, when the first PISA results were published. PISA stands for the Programme for International Student Assessment, an international test administered every 3 years to 15-year-old students around the world, measuring performance in reading, mathematics, and science. Finland ranked first in reading, second in science, and fourth in mathematics. The world was stunned. Here was a country with no elite private schools, no standardized testing culture, and a relatively modest education budget, outperforming nations that spent significantly more per student. Finland remained near the top of PISA rankings throughout the 2000s. Delegations of educators, politicians, and researchers from hundreds of countries began making pilgrimages to Helsinki to understand what was happening. What they found challenged nearly every assumption they held about what makes education work. They found calm, unhurried classrooms. They found teachers who spoke about their students with deep personal knowledge. They found children who appeared genuinely interested in what they were learning. They did not find drilling. They did not find fear of failure. They did not find children being ranked against each other. One of the most important factors observers noted was Finland's deep investment in special education and early intervention. Rather than allowing struggling students to fall behind and simply repeat grades, Finnish schools identify difficulties early and provide targeted support immediately. Nearly 30% of Finnish students receive some form of individualized support or special education services at some point in their schooling. This is not considered a stigma. It is considered simply good practice. The goal is to ensure that no student is left behind, not through lowered standards, but through increased support. The Finnish model also reflects a broader social context that cannot be entirely separated from the education system itself. Finland has extremely low rates of childhood poverty, a robust welfare state, universal healthcare, and strong family support policies including generous parental leave. Children arrive at school fed, healthy, and socially stable. While these conditions are not solely the result of education policy, they create an environment in which education policy can actually work. Many education researchers argue that it is impossible to fully replicate the Finnish model without also addressing the social inequalities that undermine learning before children ever set foot in a classroom. That said, the specific choices Finland made about teaching, assessment, curriculum design, and school culture are genuinely transferable lessons. Countries like Canada, South Korea, Singapore, and Estonia have borrowed selectively from the Finnish approach and seen meaningful improvements. The lesson is not that every nation must do exactly what Finland did. The lesson is that certain principles, trusting teachers, prioritizing equity, removing fear from the learning environment, investing in early childhood, and designing school around children's developmental needs, these principles tend to produce better outcomes wherever they are applied thoughtfully. Finland's model is not without its critics or its challenges. PISA rankings have shown Finland slipping somewhat since the peak years of the mid-2000s, with scores in mathematics and reading declining slightly. Finnish educators have openly debated the causes, pointing to increasing immigration and associated integration challenges, greater use of digital devices without adequate pedagogical frameworks, and possible complacency within a system that had become accustomed to success. These discussions are healthy and important. They reveal a culture of honest self-examination that is itself a product of the same values that built the system in the first place.